Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome to Sports Spectrum. Today's podcast is brought to you by Compassion International. For $38 a month, this is an opportunity for you to release a child from poverty through the most trusted child development ministry in the world, Compassion International. Your sponsorship provides food, education, health care, and help, providing children for the first time in their lives an opportunity to experience hope. All of it's done in Jesus' name. 2 million children and their families no longer struggling alone for the basic needs. Here's the website, compassion.com/sports spectrum. Compassion.com/sports spectrum. Pray about it. Consider sponsoring a child today. Today on the podcast, we bring you a very unique interview. We'll call it a conversation, I guess, with Matt Hasselbeck, the former NFL quarterback, longtime quarterback in the NFL, three-time Pro Bowler, and ESPN NFL analyst. You see him on Sunday NFL Countdown on Sunday mornings on ESPN. And Matt is going to interview Mike Fisher. Mike, the longtime NHL player with the Ottawa Senators and Nashville Predators from 1999 to 2018, a long career. And Mike, of course, the husband to singer-songwriter, country singer extraordinaire Carrie Underwood. And Mike and Carrie have 2 children together. And this was a unique opportunity. We were at a conference, a gathering, if you will, in Utah in the summer. And I saw Mike and Matt were going to be there. They're friends. They both played in Nashville. Mike played with the Predators, and, of course, Matt played with the Tennessee Titans. And I said, you know what? I'm going to put my producer hat on here and see if we can get these two to have a little conversation together. And so I gave them a couple mics. I told Matt, you drive the conversation, you do the interview. I'll just sit in the back and record it. And off to the races we were. And it's a really good conversation. Lots of good discussion here about faith, about sports, about social media. Really good stuff about social media. You will love this conversation with Matt Hasselbeck and Mike Fisher, hockey and football, here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Take a listen.
Mike Fisher, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thank you.
Where are we?
We're in Utah, undisclosed
location. But I am wearing my bracelet, my Park City Olympic Park bobsledding bracelet.
My stomach's still coming down off that.
So for those people who don't know, we just got done extreme bobsledding here in June. Yeah. How was it?
I screamed. So we hit the guy's like, he's like, did tell you how to sit in there, and you're wearing a helmet, and he's like, just wait till about turn 4, and just make sure you're comfortable. And about turn 4 I was screaming, oh my goodness, like 3 to 4 G's, and my stomach doesn't do well. Like, I'd like roller coasters, I just got to pace myself, but this to me was really cool.
And you were in the bobsled with an old teammate of mine, tight end, most recently with the New Orleans Saints, Kobe Fleener. What was he like? He's not a small guy. He's like 6'5",
he's huge.
At least.
Luckily, you can fit 4, and there was only 3 of us. It's just not his knees. Like, he's huge. So, but he didn't scream. So after, like, you got to hold on so tight, and I didn't really know what to expect, but it was. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah. No, this has been a fun week. So we're here with some football players, some hockey players. I'm curious about role models for you. I know for me, when I was growing up, there were certain guys in football that I looked up to. Like, I just wanted to be the next, whoever. Who were those people for you?
Well, for hockey, when I was a real young kid, my favorite player was Wayne Gretzky. A lot of Canadian kids, it was Wayne Gretzky, best player to play ever. And then when I got a little bit older, I loved Joe Sakic. I liked just the way he played. He was kind of a quiet leader, just always seemed to do the right things. And but there was guys as a kid. Those are my favorite hockey players. But as a Christian athlete, I always looked up to. I always followed the Christian athletes too. guys like Mark Osborne, who was playing for the Leafs. That I grew up just outside Toronto. Stu Grimson, who was one of the toughest guys to ever play the game.
I thought he was like the enforcer.
Yeah, he is.
He was a Christian enforcer.
Yes, and
I like it.
And then as I got a little bit older, it became a guy like Shane Doan, who solid Christian. I ended up getting to know and become friends with when I got to play with him at the World Championships. But I always looked up to the Christian hockey players. I knew exactly when I was. I wish I could find the card, but when I was probably about 10 years old, there was a hockey tournament in Peterborough, and Gary Unger stayed at our house. We were like the billet to and he was like, Christian hockey player, and I was kind of a big deal, and still had to sign a card, and so he was kind of a early, role model that I was younger then, and I think he had finished his career at that time, but also my first chaplain was Laurie Boschman, and he was one of the scrappiest players. Like not big, but he's one of the I want to say top 10 penalty minute leaders in the NHL, and so anyways, he was my first chaplain in Ottawa, and I looked up to him as a player and a person.
Yeah. So you mentioned Shane Doan. I was the quarterback. I believe I was the quarterback for the Tennessee Titans at the time in Nashville when the Preds were playing the Arizona Coyotes. Phoenix Coyotes. I'm showing my hockey knowledge here. You guys were playing the Phoenix Coyotes, and Shane Doan was the captain, and you were the captain, I believe. So, did you guys know each other? Were Christian players at that point? Did you have a relationship? Was it just because all of Nashville is hating all of Phoenix? All of Phoenix is hating all of Nashville. And yet you guys on the ice, it seemed like, wait a second, are these guys friends? What was that like?
That was 2012 or 13, I believe. I think we played in World Championships in 05 maybe. So I didn't know him before that, but I got to play with him. And so we were friends, yeah. And we usually try to get together with him every time we'd, on the road or when he'd come to town. And, we just became friends. And but that doesn't mean you're friends on the ice. My goodness. Usually those guys that you're kind of, friends with, you play them as harder.
It's like playing your brother.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Like you want to run them through,
I do know, actually, yeah.
So, but, he was just a great captain and a good person.
So I'm curious, I know what the culture in the locker room of a football team is. I know we've got typically a team chaplain. We do chapel the night before a game, or the morning of a game. Guys will have a team Bible study. There'll be a couples Bible study. What's it like in the NHL?
Well, when I first came to the league, I think there was about 6 teams. This was late 90s that had chapels, and now currently there's probably over 20. So the chapel program has grown a lot. I think we started chapels in early 2000, maybe in Ottawa. So we'll just have a chapel that's in Ottawa. There's anywhere from 3 to 5 guys, maybe, that would go. There was we didn't have any Bible study, nothing for wives. Hockey's just different than football for sure. But when I went to Nashville, the chapel was, especially the last few years, it's gone up to 8 or 10 guys that would kind of float in and out. And
is that something you do at home? You do on
no,
the
we
road?
We do it at the. You used to do it after practices, but we found guys are getting treatments and stuff, so we ended up doing it before. Which there's no perfect time because with schedules. Some guys are doing extra video or have to get on the ice or injured or whatever. But we ended up doing it before any of our meetings and workouts on a non-game day. So we found that worked pretty good.
And have you seen benefits from that, or if someone says, well, why does a hockey team need a chaplain? Why do you have chapel? What's your thought about that?
Well, both teams have been really receptive in knowing the value and the benefit of guys and teammates, getting together. And I think with chapel for me, you spend so much time around these guys, but not a lot of time you spend talking about real things, men things.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could, other than maybe your seatmate on an airplane, that's where you're kind of like, okay, he's sitting there, and that's when I've had some, great conversations. But other than that, the chapel program, guys know that they're going, to learn something, and usually that's when you find out about something, whether it be the prayer time at the end of prayer requests or something that usually guys will open up a little bit more in chapel, whereas they wouldn't in a bigger setting maybe because it's more intimate too. But I've learned more about my teammates in chapel than any other time, and that's valuable for sure, and knowing what guys are going through. And
so I mentioned that we were in Nashville together, and there's a lot of stars in Nashville. Obviously music, it's a music scene. My son became a huge Preds fan and a huge Mike Fisher fan. I think mostly because of a video game, and you were scoring a lot of goals on a video game. So I don't know if that translates to real life, but you must have
had to be the video game because it wasn't by watching.
Well, number 12 was scoring a lot, and then he read a book, like a kid's book, about you, or maybe you had something to do with it, or I'm not sure if you did. But I just remember this one night he's going to bed, and the lights are out, and he's like, and at the time, so I should mention, the house we were renting from Tim McGraw and Faith Hill. Like that's the house that we were renting in when we played for the Titans. And he goes to bed, and he's like, Dad, do you think you could do me a favor? And I was like, sure, man. What is it? And he says, do you think you could ask Tim McGraw to ask Faith Hill, to ask Carrie Underwood, to ask Mike Fisher if I could get his autograph? And I was like, I'm sure there's probably an easier way. But to him, you are a huge star and his favorite of all time in any sport. And part of the reason was in this book, the Bible verse that you signed your autograph to meant so much to him. And it was at the time, Philippians 4:13. So can you tell me, I'm just curious about favorite Bible verses, maybe that one or others.
Yeah, that book was for. I did have something to do with that book. I'm the worst writer in the world, but I did have a ghostwriter, and it was targeted for kids, kind of 9 to 12, just to kind of get my story out a little bit, and that's my reading level too, so that helps. But I love that verse. I think it's an empowering verse as an athlete. One other verse that I love, kind of has a significant meaning. Actually, it's got Boston in it too, because it's in the Boston Garden, or the new TD Garden. TD Garden used to be the old Boston Garden.
That's right.
But it was Romans 12:12, and my old chaplain sent me this verse a few months before this happened. But he sent me Romans 12:12. Be glad, for all God is planning for you. Be patient in trouble, and always be prayerful. And so I was in a game against Boston on the road, and I went in behind the net and kind of tweaked my ankle, and I couldn't get up, and I thought I'd broken it. So I go in to get X-rays across the hall, and you're just thinking, it was about 3 weeks before the playoffs, so I'm thinking, okay, my playoffs are shot. This is, I couldn't put any weight on it, whatever. And so I go and sit in the training room, and in the training room there's a clock, and it stops and starts with the game clock. And so I'm just kind of sitting there going through my head, and I'd had tons of injuries in my career. I'm just like, hey, Lord, give me a break, But then all of a sudden the clock stops at 12:12. And then I think of that verse right away, and I just recite it in my mind, and I'm like, okay. And then got the X-rays back, and it was sprained, and I just got back in time for playoffs, but it was just kind of a unique. So I always put that verse too on my stick, which was significant, as well as Philippians 4:13. But that was kind of a neat story. So.
That's cool. And you're number 12.
That's right.
There you go.
Yeah.
So the increased videos that guys have done, or the increased conference, is sort of built on this verse of John 3:30. John the Baptist, basically, when people were trying to give him credit and trying to say, hey, John the Baptist, you're the man. He's saying, hey, no, I must decrease so he can increase, sort of shine a light on Jesus and not on himself, sort of reflect, I guess, to him. I'm curious about John 3:30 because I believe there's a history there with you in that verse.
Yeah, I put that verse on my Twitter handle.
Okay.
And I just, which I know, I no longer use, but yeah, I just love that verse. I've had it there for a long time, and I think it's just a great reminder for all of us that we can all get selfish and be about us and take all this praise, especially as athletes. But at the end of the day, it's not about us; it's about Him. And for me, it was just when I ever hear that voice, it's just a great reminder of, okay, it's got to be about Him. And there's a song on the radio. I forget even what it's called, but it talks about legacy. And I've always been uncomfortable with the word legacy as an athlete because you hear about it in top athletes, and it's not really their fault, but at times they talk about, I want my legacy to be the best player ever. And it always kind of inside of me is like, maybe it's because I'm not the best player, didn't have a chance either. But it's like, what better legacy to leave than someone that says your name and thinks about Him? And that song is a perfect example. I love the song. Just talks exactly about that. My legacy has got to be about Him, and I wish I could sing that song.
I know the song.
You know what it
I
is?
do, and I don't want to sing it though.
And I just every time I hear that, it's like, man, yes, But that's a lot about the increase.
Yeah. So you mentioned you're not on Twitter anymore. Were you on Twitter, and why are you not on Twitter?
I've had Twitter for a little while, and I still have the account. I just deleted it on my phone about a month ago maybe. I just found, it's one of those things that, it just became a time waster, and I ended up, so much political stuff that I was like, man, I don't really want to get
Twitter. I heard someone call it Twister. What they call
Twister.
it? Twister. It's a time waster. I've been
and
guilty
that's what
of that.
It became for me.
Yeah.
And I still have Instagram, and I think it's a good tool. In having a business too, business that I'm into, but there's also, it can be a time waster too if you don't use it properly, which is tough to do at times.
No, I'm guilty. I mean, I don't know if you've ever done this. This is embarrassing, but I have actually closed Twitter and then reopened it. It's just like, wait, I just closed it. It reminds me of like I'd go to the refrigerator like right after dinner, I'd look in there and I'd shut it and I'd go right back to it. It's a problem.
We'll return to our interview with Matt Hasselbeck and Mike Fisher in just a second, but I want to take time to tell you about Compassion International. They are the most trusted child development ministry in the world, and what they're doing, releasing children from poverty, is just such an encouragement. It's $38 a month. It's tax deductible, and it connects you, the sponsor, with a child living in poverty. And through this loving church-based child sponsorship program, your support provides medical checkups, nutritious food, health and hygiene training, educational assistance, mentoring to help children discover their incredible value, and access to special services like surgeries and disaster relief. Most of all, and this is the most important part, your sponsored child will hear about Jesus Christ and be encouraged to develop a lifelong relationship with God. Go to the website, compassion.com/sportsspectrum. You'll see a list of children there waiting, some as young as 3 or 4, some as old as their teenage years, many of them waiting for 300 plus days for someone like you to sponsor them. Go to that website, compassion.com/sportsspectrum, pray about it, and consider releasing a child from poverty today. Let's get back to our conversation with Matt Hasselbeck and Mike Fisher here on Sports Spectrum's podcast.
Well, I really appreciate, our friendship. It started, we're not even really sure when our friendship started because we've probably been hit in the head too many times, but I think we nailed down when we think it started. But it was watching a soccer practice of the U.S. women's national soccer team. They were playing in Nashville. They were playing a friendly, and I asked you if you could hook me up with tickets for them to come see you play. Yeah. And we just had a conversation there watching their practice just about, what it's like to lead in your locker room, what it's like to be authentic in your locker room. And so I certainly appreciate, who you are and getting to know some other guys in hockey who either know you or look up to you. But the question I guess I have, there's the one question I have. I know for me in football, there's always this battle. You want to be this strong Christian guy, yet you want to be the fiercest, toughest competitor, hard-nosed, like someone the opponent does not want to play. Mm-hmm. How do you balance that? How do you see that?
Yeah, it's a question I get a lot, like, from people that, see the games and see fighting and, you're a Christian, but how can you fight? And I guess there's no real easy answer. Other than a lot of times when I'd fight, it would be for a teammate or, I'm not saying some fights are justified, but I felt like it was part of my role as a especially later as a leader. Fighting is, allowed in hockey. You still go to the sin bin, but it's part of the game.
That's the penalty box, the sin bin.
Yeah.
I like that.
But, after fighting to me, in a lot of instances, is a lot like boxing, where it's, there's a lot of respect on both sides for somebody to fight. It's not always out of just, I'm going to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that happens, but I guess I always, when I was a kid growing up in Canada, I did get ridiculed for my faith early on because I wasn't, ashamed about it. And I guess I wanted to prove to people too that I could be a hockey player, be a Christian. And sometimes, Christians can kind of be pigeonholed as soft. And I was like, I'm not going to be, I didn't want to be like that.
Right.
And I think God kind of gave me a determination too. And there's a lot tougher guys out there in the league too that are Christians and probably can answer this question a lot better. But I think I got some of my work ethic and that from my dad because he's one of the hardest workers I've ever seen. But and I wanted to translate that into being an athlete. And but I don't know if I really answered your question very well.
No, I guess I just remember when I was a rookie with the Green Bay Packers, the most sort of devout guy on our team was Reggie White.
Yeah,
and he actually was also maybe the best football player in the world. I mean, he was the guy that was gonna knock you on your back, embarrass you, get to the quarterback, sack the quarterback, and then walk back and help you up. Yeah. The guy that was supposed to block him, like, hey, good try, brother. It's like, hey, bless you, brother. It was a good try. That was almost a good block, I don't know. It was fun to watch. I had never really seen anybody, besides my dad and his friends, but they were like my dad and his friends. I'd never really seen anybody that was a strong Christian guy that was all about serving others, and yet on the field was taking names, and he was a beast, and people were afraid to go up against him. That was so cool for me to see as a young player, and really as a backup quarterback. I was the fourth string quarterback in Green Bay my rookie year. It was Brett Favre, Doug Peterson, Rick Meyer, then me. So the quarterbacks coach Andy Reid was like, "Listen, there's nothing for you to do at practice. Do you mind playing, scout team tight end?" I'm like, sure. Well, scout team tight end blocks the defensive end. That's Reggie White. I mean, it was I got to be around him, and it just was like, it was a testimony without saying a word. It was exactly what I was struggling with all through college. Like, how am I this? How can I be both? And really, for me, it was when I found out who Jesus really was. He wasn't like, the hallmark flower Jesus in a dress that loves pastel colors. He was like a man's man, carpenter, friends with fishermen, that kind of a guy.
I grew up like some of those role models I was talking about that, played. They were unbelievable players, and they were, tough as nails. And so I guess I kind of wanted to be like them too in the way they played. And one kind of funny story, I just remembered a guy named Rich Clun, who's tough as nails player. Not the biggest guy, but man, this guy was tough. And he wasn't playing one night. It was Friday night at home. So our coach, Barry Trotz at the time, told him, okay, you're going to go in before the game and announce the starting lineup to the guys. So he comes in a suit, and he has names down, and he's announcing who's going to start the game to all the players. And he's a funny guy too. So he gets to me, and I was starting center. He's like, starting center number 12, Mike Fisher. He will punch your teeth out Saturday night and take you to church on Sunday morning. and I thought, well, I didn't at the time really think of, I'm not a big fighter. I will, but
it was a compliment.
It was I guess it was a compliment, but still it was kind of funny that, those things can go hand in hand, and I think it's how you go about it too.
Mm-hmm.
It's in your intent and in doing it. So,
last thing. Here's the last question. So in football, at the end of a football game, both teams meet at the 50-yard line, take a knee at the 50, say a prayer together. It's one of the coolest things I think that our sport does, because we don't really know each other. We don't know what we look like with the helmets off, a lot of guys. But in hockey, I think you guys might have but in hockey, you guys have a very cool tradition also at the end of a series where you take your helmet off, you get in line, you kind of do this look you in the eye handshake. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And I don't know if that factors into your faith at all, or how you live your life, or what that's. Take us there. We've never been there.
Yeah,
take
that's
us
a
there.
tradition that's been around for a long, long time. That's a cool tradition that I think we only do it in playoffs, but it's one of those things that I think is really cool thing of respect. And I think that maybe in Europe, I want to say I played in Europe during the lockout. I think we did it after every game there, but I think it was definitely started in North America, the handshake deal. But I think it's just a respect thing, and we don't have any prayer time after, and maybe that's coming. But the only time I've ever done at World Championships, we did prayer as a group together, not with opposing team, but just some of the guys together with Doan and Hamwis and some other guys. We did it kind of just on our own before the game. But I get that question all the time, because people see football and it's like, what would that look like in hockey? For guys getting together. And I've had conversations with some other Christian players, and just, what if we did that? No one's ever done it.
Yeah.
And would that be good? Would it be would people not that I would really care what other people thought, but
it's
interesting.
It's interesting because as fans, you probably think, oh, these guys hate each other, but clearly that's not really, your opponents,
right? And if you're on the same team, as brothers, in Christ, I've always wondered that, but it's never,
Do you have a story, or do you have one, handshake that sticks out to you, like anything anybody ever said or you said to somebody else after a win or a loss? Or
one of the hardest handshakes was in the finals 2 years ago. One of my best friends, another Christian player, is Matt Cullen. So he was in Pittsburgh. I was playing for the Preds, and I thought we both, we talked just before the series started, and then it was obviously don't talk to each other. Our wives didn't talk. Carrie's like, no, I can't talk to Bridget. It's like, no. It was like,
I totally get it.
They were worse than Matt and I, the wives,
They get competitive. It's true.
So anyway, the handshake for me, I thought he was going to retire, and because he'd been talking about it, and he was like 4 years older than me, and I thought I was going to retire too, and. So, anyways, I forget what I said. Just like unbelievable career, and he just won the cup, and I'd lost the cup, So it was one of those tough moments, but it was like kind of choking back tears, because he was a good friend that I played with, and one of my best friends in hockey, and thinking we were both, this is it,
Right.
Handshake, you win, I lose. Okay, see you later. But that was kind of a cool moment. But he ended up coming back. He's still playing. I think he may retire this summer, but we'll see. Kept thinking he was, and he's 42 now, but. Yeah, that was a cool moment, because I was happy for him at the same time. It was like, he's like brother,
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, if I'm happy for anyone to win it against me, it's him,
Yeah.
But anyway.
So I'm curious about just a daily routine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's any different now that you're retired or not playing hockey versus when you were playing hockey, but what's a daily routine for Mike Fisher, the Christian, to grow spiritually?
Mm-hmm.
What's that look like?
When I'm at home, we try to eat breakfast together as a family, and so usually after that I'll try and do something. I have a journal, and this book that I'm going through that kind of journals it throughout the year with scriptures every day, and prayer lists and stuff. And then been trying to do it doesn't happen every day, but there's a book called Indescribable for kids. So I'll do that with my son, and he likes it. It's kind of a cool book. But on the road, it's tough.
Is that a play off the Chris Tomlin song Indescribable?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but on the road, I mean, I love Jesus Calling. I get Rick Warren's. I'd be lying to you if you said I read, open my Bible every day. But I read Scripture every day, whether it be from those things. And on tour is different because I like being at home, being routine, schedule, and I can really get into it. I know when I'm getting up, but that's not the case, especially as athletes and busy families. And but yeah, when I travel, I read a lot more books. Right now, I'm reading Raising Boys. So if I'm traveling by myself, when when you're at home, it's hard to read any length of time. But if I'm traveling, I love reading.
Do you have a favorite book?
Purpose Driven Life is one of them. Probably had one of the biggest impacts on me. Wild at Heart's another one that really resonated with me.
So can I ask you just a quick question about, you mentioned some mentors. There's a former baseball player named Tim Burke, who I've gotten to know just a little bit, but just seems like an incredible guy. I guess I'm just looking for what's been the influence on some of these other ministry type people, like a Tim Burke in your career, in your life.
Yeah, Tim's one of my closest friends, and he has got a gift that, man, just one of those guys that you always want to be around, and always encouraging. Anytime I'd get together with him, he'd have something, just one little thing that's like, I just want to really feel like I need to encourage you with this. And he'd ask me, tough questions at the right time, but he's got one of the sweetest hearts you'll ever see. And he's got quite the story and been through a lot. And there's other, our chaplain and Pike Williams in Nashville is one of those guys too. That's just solid. One of those, both those guys, and my dad as well. But some of those guys, it's like, okay, I want to be like that when I'm 50, 60, or age. Anyway,
50, 60. How old is he?
But yeah, so those guys to me, and then I have another mentor is my cousin when I was younger that really helped me a lot. Without those guys, I don't know where I'd be spiritually, because they just poured into me like crazy. But yeah, they've helped me so much, and those guys that you just love being around, and then they just building into you. And I want to be, I'm at that age now where it's like, I want to be that guy to my son and, my sons and other younger guys, but, so yeah,
Good. Yeah. Do you have a favorite Christian song? Do you have a favorite song?
Gee.
You're allowed to say, I'm besides
all time,
besides Carrie Underwood songs. Do you have a favorite song?
All time?
Sure.
I would have to say, I Can Only Imagine Mercy Me would be one of my favorite songs all time.
Have you seen that movie?
No, I haven't,
It's
but
great.
I know
It's a
I've
great
heard
movie.
it's so good. But when that song came out, I don't know. Maybe because it's like in my range too of singing.
I feel like I've seen you singing. Where did I see you singing? Like in a studio, I saw you singing.
Oh, a music video, Before She Bleeds. That one?
I don't know.
A spoof from one of Carrie's songs.
Oh, is it a spoof? Oh, I didn't know if it was real. It was one of those, like, I could have clicked on the link, but I had bad Wi-Fi, and I was like...
No, maybe that was a little teaser.
If it's really good, I'll hear about
something.
it, and if it's really bad, I'll hear about it.
Yeah.
So that's your favorite all-time song?
It could be, yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I'm bad with that, but that's one of them that comes to mind. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm just curious what your daily disciplines are in terms of, how you grow spiritually.
For me, that kind of, at home you're getting up at certain times, and with busy schedule it changes. But I think as I get older, at least my prayer time has become more. I don't know if it's just what you kind of get used to. It's like prayer before bed, pray when you get up. But as I get older, it's so much more about just when I'm driving down the road, when something happens with my son, when it's like these moments that these teaching moments as being a parent where it's like, even though praying little things with your son with the boo-boo, those things to me, in my prayer life, has definitely evolved But as far as I started journaling a lot more probably in the last 2 years of my prayer life, which has helped. Before I just try to remember anything, my memory's awful and I'd feel bad. And if someone asked for a prayer request or can you pray for this, I'd do it right away because I didn't want to say. I never wanted to be like, yes, I will, and then I never did it. I'm like, oh. And I'm sure I've done that and forgotten, but so that's definitely helped. But
do you feel like there's more? Do you feel like there's more to pray for now that you're a father?
Oh, yeah. No
I mean,
doubt.
honestly.
Oh yeah, for sure. But yeah, no doubt. But I have, since I retired, which is one kind of thing that I've never been able to do as a player, is like have a real men's group. So every other Wednesday morning, get together with a group of 8 or 9 guys from buddies and friends that go to our church.
Athletes or just?
There's one former baseball player. Our pastor's there. Just some other buddies. Kind of a group that we all go to the same church for the most part. And one of Carrie's band members, just kind of guys like that, same stage of life, kids, and that's one of the things that I love now, being retired, that I'm able to do, which helps.
Kids sporting events.
Oh,
is that what you mean, or the men's?
No,
group?
Men's group. Yeah,
Okay.
just being able to get together with guys and just talk about real stuff.
Which is ironic because that's the thing I miss about not playing. I don't have that on a daily basis like I used to. Yeah. Well, Mike, it was an honor to be in Nashville with you at the same time and playing together. It's been an honor to get to know you. We serve on the board of Danita's Children, an orphanage in Haiti together, and we're trying to attack some things there in Haiti at Danita's Children, with the orphanage, with the school, with the hospital, and so you guys are doing an awesome job there.
Well, I think we both. Once you go there and see it and see, I'd been on one trip to El Salvador for World Vision. I'd never really been on we did some filming and that was kind of my first missions trip, but Danita's was my second, and I went with my wife and in a church group at the time, and you just fall in love with the kids and the people, and you know how it is, and it was kind of the first, because my wife has, she loves animals and she has some ministry sports. And then I had others coming into a marriage, but that was the first one, like together we were like, oh, this is like our, she loves it. I love it. It's kind of cool. You go together. So anyway, it's been a ministry that's near and dear to both of our hearts. And it's been, fun seeing you at board meetings.
Well,
I'll tell you what, Matt is. He brings a lot of great wisdom, and I'm more of a thinker, and he's a thinker and a great communicator. That some gifts.
I'm more of a disruptor.
No, you ask like
up.
You're good at what you do. You're wise and you ask good questions. But anyway, I appreciate. All
Thanks,
you've
man.
done, and I looked up to you as a football player. Before I met you, I knew you're a Christian, and I always followed different Christians and different sports, and it's kind of cool because as other athletes, it's like, hey, what happens in football? And that's what we've talked about a lot. Like I have no idea. I remember catching your football after training one time. I was like, oh, this is cool. I've never caught a quarterback's football. It's like. It's just I love that.
Hockey players can catch pretty good. Soccer players they like bounce it off their chest and start like juggling it with their feet. I
can't throw a football, but I think I catch okay.
Well, I saw the scars from your elbow surgery, your tricep surgery, your finger surgery. That's just on that one arm. So I think right. You probably had a shoulder too. So you probably had
left shoulder.
Okay, all right. Well, Mike, you've always been an impact player. You're an impact player on the ice and obviously off the field. So thank you for taking time with this podcast. It's a pleasure, man.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate
it.
I really enjoyed that conversation with Mike Fisher and Matt Hasselbeck on Sports Spectrum's podcast. And you could tell those guys had a connection. They were friends, and their rapport, their back and forth was genuine. I loved some of the topics that they discussed, especially social media. I thought that was interesting. Great stuff there from Matt and from Mike. Obviously, give him a follow. Matt is on Twitter, and he'll probably open up Twitter and then close it and then open it right back up, as he said in the podcast conversation. And Mike Fisher is on Instagram. That's really the one place that he's been on. You heard him talk about not really using Twitter much anymore. So you can give them a follow there. And please tell Matt, tell Mike, let them know you heard their story here on Sports Spectrum. And a special thank you to Matt Hasselbeck. This is the third time he's been on this podcast. The very first time was way back in April of 2017. It was episode number 2. And Matt Hasselbeck was on with myself and Pastor Matt Chandler. Still, our most downloaded podcast at Sports Spectrum was way back at episode number 2 with Matt Chandler. So lots of good stuff there. And then we had Matt Hasselbeck on solo last year, right around this time, actually, in late August, early September of 2018. That was episode number 149 of the podcast. And Matt's just a great dude. He can talk about anything. And that's honestly what I did. I gave him a microphone. I told him, here's Mike Fisher. Ask him whatever you want. And that's what this podcast was. So many thanks to Matt and to Mike for being here on Sports Spectrum. Also, a shout out to our sponsors, Compassion International. We love working with them. Give them a look over at their website, compassion.com/sports spectrum, and consider releasing a child from poverty. It's a great opportunity for you and I to help bring hope to a child in need. Go to compassion.com/sports spectrum and sponsor a child today. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. If this is the first time you've found Sports Spectrum, welcome. We love having you here. Do us a favor, click that subscribe button so you never miss an episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast. And check out our website, sportspectrum.com. You can give us a follow on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, as well as YouTube. And, of course, our website, that's the place to be. And our website, as I mentioned, that's the place to be, sportspectrum.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time with a brand new episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast, where faith and sports collide. We'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.